Okay, so get this right. I was looking at some stats on this UK Ancestry Visa thing,
Hmm.
and it's crazy how many people could be eligible, you know?
Yeah.
But they don't even know it. It's like having a secret weapon in your family history,
Right.
which is what we're diving into today. You want to know more about that UK Ancestry Visa?
It's a popular one.
You've been researching. We've got all that research you've been doing straight from the UK government website, by the way.
The official source.
Let's break it down.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's do it.
So first things first, who can actually apply for this thing?
So it's designed for a few specific groups, right?
Yeah.
You've got Commonwealth citizens, British overseas citizens,
Right. Those make sense.
British overseas territories,
Nice.
citizens,
Mm.
British nationals, overseas. And here's the kicker. Citizens of Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe. Now that's interesting. I gotta ask, why Zimbabwe?
Yeah, it's a bit of a historical quirk, really.
Okay.
It all goes back to, colonial history and how Zimbabwe became independent. Their unique path tied to the UK's past there. That's why they're specifically mentioned.
So it's not enough to just be from these places now. It's about those historical ties, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And speaking of historical ties, what about that grandparent rule? I've seen that pop up a lot.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. So you have to be able to prove that at least one grandparent was born in a very specific place at a very specific time. The UK, the Channel Islands, or the Isle of Man before March 31st, 1922. Or in some cases, Ireland.
Okay, so 1922 is the magic date. What's so special about that year?
Well, 1922 is when the Irish Free State was formed, right? Big shift in British history. Had massive implications for citizenship and all that. And it still affects this visa today.
It's like one of those historical domino effects.
Exactly.
So I'm sure people are wondering, what about adoptions? Do those count?
Good news is yes. You can totally claim ancestry through an adopted grandparent.
So it doesn't have to be strictly blood then?
Right. Legal adoption works.
Okay, that makes sense. What about step-parents, though?
Unfortunately, that's a no-go. Has to be that direct lineage or legal adoption.
Gotcha. So we've covered the who can apply. But how long are we talking about here? This visa has a unique timeline, right?
It does, yeah. It's a 5-year visa to start with.
So 5 years to get settled?
Exactly. Think of it as a stepping stone,
Okay.
You can extend it for another 5 years after that.
Okay.
But here's where it gets really interesting. After those first 5 years, you might be able to apply for indefinite leave to remain.
Indefinite leave. That sounds promising. What does that even mean, though?
It's essentially the UK's version of permanent residency, the golden ticket, your permanent pass to live and work there.
Okay, that's huge. But just because you can apply, it doesn't mean you automatically get to stay permanently. There've got to be some hurdles, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a whole other process with a whole other set of requirements.
We'll unpack all of that later on.
We'll dive into it.
But first, let's talk about some of those less obvious, even surprising things about this visa. Because it's not all about proving your family history, right? There's money stuff, work expectations, even limitations on how you can actually use the visa once you're in the UK.
Yeah, for sure. The UK wants to make sure that people coming in on this visa are going to support themselves, contribute to society.
Makes sense.
That's why there's such a big focus on financial independence. You can't just rely on public funds.
When you say public funds, you mean like
Yeah, exactly.
unemployment benefits, that kind of thing?
Exactly, that kind of thing. Government assistance, housing benefit. You've got to prove you can pay your own way.
So how much are we talking about here? Is there a magic number they're looking for?
That's the tricky part. There isn't a set amount. It's more about demonstrating you can support yourself. They'll want to see bank statements, savings, maybe even income from investments.
So it's less about a magic number and more about proving you've got a solid plan.
Exactly. They just want to see that you've thought about this, you're prepared to be financially responsible while you're living in the UK.
So you've got to have your finances in order, which makes sense. And then on top of that,
Yeah.
you're actually expected to work
Right.
while you're in the UK on this visa.
It's not a free ride.
Right. It's not just a free ticket to go live there, right?
Thing. Exactly.
So does it have to be like a specific type of work? What counts?
That's the good news. It's actually pretty flexible.
Okay.
Paid employment is the most straightforward, obviously.
Yep, sure.
But even volunteer work will count towards it.
Really?
You could be self-employed, you could start a business,
Wow.
traditional job, whatever works for you.
Okay.
The key is just being able to show them, look, I'm economically active, I'm contributing here.
So it's more about
Yeah.
showing that you want to be a part of things
Exactly.
rather than just being there, taking up space.
That is.
Okay, that's good to know. So let's talk about that restriction. On switching to the Ancestry Visa from another visa. Why is that a thing?
So essentially what they're trying to prevent is people coming to the UK, say, on a tourist visa,
Right.
and then being like, oh, actually, I think I want to stay here long term. I'm going to switch to an ancestry visa.
Right. It keeps people from gaming the system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's meant to be for people who are specifically seeking entry based on their ancestry.
Right. From the get-go.
From the beginning.
Okay. So what happens if someone is already in the UK, maybe on a different visa,
Sure.
and wants to switch? What are their options?
They would have to look into other visa categories, really,
Okay.
that allow for switching, depending on their individual circumstances.
Gotcha.
But for this particular visa, yeah, it's all about that initial intention.
Okay. That makes sense. Now, let's talk about bringing family.
Okay, yeah.
Because I'm sure a lot of people listening are like, okay, that's great for me, but what about my partner, my kids, you know?
Yeah, of course, that's a big one. And yes, the UK Ancestry Visa does let you bring your dependents.
Okay, so who exactly qualifies as a dependent?
So we're talking partners,
Mm-hmm.
children under 18,
Mm-hmm.
and even children over 18 who were previously dependents on your visa.
Oh, wow. Okay, so even some adult children might be able to
Potentially, yeah.
come along.
hmm
Okay, so that's good. I'm guessing there are some pretty specific requirements for partners, though, right? You can't just bring anyone and be like, this is my partner.
No, you need to show them it's the real deal.
Yeah.
If you're married, you'd need your marriage certificate. If you're unmarried, then you're going to need evidence that you've been living together in a genuine relationship for at least 2 years.
So they're really making sure it's legit, not just
Exactly.
oh, hey, come with me kind of thing.
Not a quick thing. Yeah.
What if a child is born in the UK while someone is on the Ancestry Visa? Do they automatically become British citizens?
That's a good question, and surprisingly, no.
Really?
Even if the child is born on UK soil while the parents are on this visa, they don't get automatic citizenship.
Wow. I'm sure a lot of people assume that.
That's a common misconception, yeah.
Wow, that's good to clarify.
Yeah, it's always best to double check with these things.
So since we're talking about dependents, what about their access to public funds? Is it the same as the main visa holder?
Unfortunately, it's not that simple.
Mhm.
Dependents on this visa, generally, have very limited access to public funds.
So that means
Yeah,
they wouldn't be eligible for most benefits.
exactly, right.
Okay.
Unless it's a very specific circumstance, like emergency medical care or something like that.
Right. So it really reinforces that idea that this
Yeah.
visa is for those who can support themselves
Yeah.
and their family
Exactly.
without needing
They can
to
rely on the government.
rely on the government, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we've covered who's eligible, the timeline, finances, family. What about actually applying? That process can be a little daunting.
It can, yeah, but it's all online now, thankfully,
Well, that's something.
which makes it a little easier,
Yeah.
Create an account, fill out the application, give your biometrics, fingerprints, that kind of thing. And then you submit all your documents.
Okay, speaking of documents, what are the absolute must-haves? Like, what can't you forget?
Big ones, your birth certificate,
Okay.
your parents' birth certificate, and then, super important, the birth certificate of the grandparent you're claiming ancestry through.
Gotcha. So it all links back.
It all goes back, exactly. And then, obviously, all that proof of finances, we talked about bank statements, all that.
Right. To prove that you can
You got it.
support yourself.
Yep.
Okay, and then how long does it usually take to hear back?
So typically for that initial 5-year visa, about 3 weeks.
Okay.
But I do have to say processing times can vary.
Of course.
And things like extensions, settlement, that might take longer.
So patience is key.
Always. Patience is a virtue, as they say.
Right. Okay, so any common pitfalls that people should watch out for during this application process, like things to be extra careful about?
One of the biggest ones is just simple mistakes.
Okay.
Incomplete information, inaccurate information. Double check everything.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you have all the right documents. That's huge. And then, of course, not meeting those financial requirements, that's another big one.
Right, and with those financial documents, it's not just about the snapshot of, do you have enough money in your account at this very moment?
Right, it's more nuanced than that.
Right, it's more about showing a history.
Exactly.
Being responsible.
It's about showing that you have a plan. They want to know you're going to be okay.
That you're not going to be a drain on the system, essentially.
Exactly, yeah. You want to be contributing.
Right, okay.
So, yeah, be organized, be thorough.
So basically, don't leave anything to chance.
Exactly. And if you're unsure about anything, don't guess. Look it up.
Right.
The UK government website is actually really helpful. It's got a ton of information.
Oh, good.
Use it. And honestly, if you're still not sure, talk to a professional. you know.
Yeah.
An immigration advisor can...
Get some advice.
Exactly, it's worth it.
Solid advice. So we've talked about the nitty-gritty, requirements, finances, paperwork, but what's it actually like to live and work in the UK?
That's the fun part.
Right, because it's not just about getting the visa.
It's a whole life change.
It's about building a life, right? So what advice would you give someone on actually finding work, a place to live, all that?
It starts with research, honestly.
It's like you've got the keys to this new place, but then you've got to figure out how to actually live there.
It's exciting, though.
Oh, for sure.
It's a big adventure.
But I imagine it's a lot to handle, too.
It can be a bit overwhelming, yeah. But I would say start with research.
Oh,
Think about what's important to you, right? What kind of lifestyle are you looking for? City life?
yeah.
Something quieter? What appeals to you?
So do your homework just like you did with the visa application itself.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And don't be afraid to reach out to people.
Yeah.
Network. Connect with online communities. See if there are professional organizations in your field that have chapters over there.
Networking. That's such a good point. It's all about who you know, right?
Yeah, it really is, yeah.
What about finding a place to live? That can be a nightmare in a new country.
It can be competitive, yeah, especially in those bigger cities.
Right.
Start your search early. Familiarize yourself with the different neighborhoods, that kind of thing.
Right. Do you want to be in the middle of it all or a little further out?
Exactly.
Big decision. And then there are those cultural adjustments, right?
Yeah.
The UK isn't that different.
Right.
There are always those little things.
There are always those little differences.
Right.
But embrace them. You're not just moving somewhere new, you're tapping into a whole new culture. Be open to new experiences. Be curious. Ask questions.
It's all part of the adventure, right? Okay, so we've talked about the practical stuff, but let's get back to that visa. You mentioned after the first 5 years, people might be able to apply for indefinite leave to remain.
Right, so
What's that application process like? What are the hurdles?
So they'll look at your time in the UK, first of all. They want to see that you've been living there consistently for those 5 years. No disappearing for months at a time.
So no big long vacations back home?
Well, you can have vacations, but nothing too extended.
Right. Okay.
They just want to see that you're really making the UK your base.
Makes sense.
And then there's the good character requirement.
Okay, what's that about?
They'll look at your criminal record, any immigration issues, that kind of thing.
So basically, have you been a good citizen while you've been there?
Basically, yeah. And of course, they'll check your finances again.
Right, because things might have changed in those 5 years.
Exactly. They want to make sure you can still support yourself without relying on public funds.
So it's like a whole refresh on those initial requirements.
Exactly, yeah. They're making sure you're still a good fit for what they're looking for.
Okay, so it's a big decision, but this deep dive has given everyone the information to start with, at least.
Absolutely. It's all about being prepared.
Right, and knowing what you're getting into.
Exactly.
We've gone through eligibility, the timeline, finances, bringing family, the application, even some practical tips for when you get there. We've covered it all.
All the bases.
So as you continue your research, and you should continue your research, I want you to really think about what you want that life to look like in the UK, What do you want to achieve there?
Don't just dream it. Plan it.
Right. This is just the beginning.
It's an exciting journey.
So keep exploring, keep researching, keep asking those questions. Who knows? Your UK story might just be starting right now.
I love that.